The bullet that had nearly killed Amelia Carter 3 years ago left more than just a scar across her ribs. It left her hollow, everyone said, like something vital had bled out along with all that blood on the dusty floor of her father's general store. She stood now in the doorway of that same establishment in Red Cloud, Nebraska, watching the summer sun of 1876 paint the dirt streets gold, her hand unconsciously touching the place where the outlaw's gun had spoken its violence, where her husband had died trying to shield her, where her unborn child had been lost in the aftermath of shock and grief. "You ought to smile more, Amelia," Mrs. Henderson said, gathering her parcels from the counter. "A young woman of 23 shouldn't look so haunted, though I suppose some things break a person beyond fixing." Amelia forced her lips into something resembling pleasantness and said nothing. What was there to say? The whole town had decided 3 years ago that she was ruined, that the tragedy had carved out her capacity for joy and left behind only this shell that ran her father's store since he'd passed last winter. They pitied her in their way, these good people of Red Cloud, but pity always came wrapped in judgment, in the unspoken belief that she'd chosen this half-life, this existence behind a counter measuring out flour and fabric, while life happened to everyone else. The bell above the door chimed as Mrs. Henderson left, and Amelia returned to her inventory, her pen scratching numbers into the ledger with mechanical precision. The store needed restocking before winter, and the supply wagons from Omaha were unreliable at best. She'd need to send someone up into the bluffs to purchase game meat from the hunters and trappers who worked the wilderness areas. Men who traded venison and elk for coin and supplies, rather than making the journey into town themselves. The thought had barely formed when the bell chimed again, and Amelia glanced up to offer her professional greeting. The words died in her throat. The man who ducked through her doorway was massive, broad-shouldered and tall enough that he had to mind the frame, with dark hair that fell past his collar in thick waves, and a beard that couldn't quite hide the strong line of his jaw. His shirt, worn but clean, stretched across a chest and arms that spoke of years of hard physical labor, of swinging axes and hauling timber and wrestling the mountain itself into submission. His hands, resting easily at his sides, were broad and calloused, the hands of a man who built his life with his own strength. But it was his eyes that caught her, deep brown and startlingly gentle in that rugged face, scanning the store with the careful awareness of someone who'd spent more time with trees than people. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in the floorboards. "Name's Dalton Keller. I've got pelts and meat to trade if you're buying, and I need supplies for the winter months." Amelia found her voice, though it came out more businesslike than she'd intended. "I buy from trappers when the quality is good. What are you offering?" He stepped aside, revealing several bundles just outside the door, furs that even from a distance looked prime, thick and well-cured, and wrapped parcels that would be the meat he'd mentioned. Elk mostly, some deer. The pelts are beaver, mink, and fox. All taken legally on unclaimed land up in the bluffs. She moved around the counter, her skirts swishing against the wooden floor, and stepped outside to examine his goods. The summer heat hit her immediately, but she ignored it, focusing on the furs he unrolled for her inspection. They were beautiful, expertly prepared without a trace of the gamey smell that marked amateur work. The meat, too, was properly dressed and wrapped, the mark of someone who knew his craft. "These are excellent quality," she admitted, running her fingers over a particularly fine beaver pelt. "I can give you fair market price plus 10% for the craftsmanship. The meat, I'll buy all of it. The restaurant down the street is always looking for game, and I broker for them." Something flickered in those brown eyes, surprise perhaps, or respect. That's generous. Most merchants try to talk down mountain men, figure we don't know better. I know quality when I see it, Mr. Keller, and I know the work that goes into this. She named her price, and when he nodded agreement, she felt an odd flutter of satisfaction. They worked together to bring his goods inside, and Amelia was acutely aware of his size, his strength, the way he moved with careful precision around her smaller frame, as though afraid his bulk might accidentally harm her. She'd grown accustomed to being treated as fragile, but this felt different, not pity, but consideration, the same way she'd seen him handle the furs with respect for what they'd been. At the counter, she counted out his payment while he examined the store, his gaze lingering on the shelves of supplies, clearly making mental calculations about what he needed versus what he could afford. "You're new to the area?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. She didn't usually engage in small talk, had trained herself out of the habit after too many conversations that ended in pitying looks and awkward silences. "Been up in the bluffs about 6 months," he replied, accepting the coins and paper money she offered. "Built a cabin near the North Ridge. Good timber up there, good hunting, peaceful." The way he said that last word made her think he understood something about needing distance from the world, from the noise and expectations and judgments of other people. Before she could stop herself, she said, "It must be lonely, though." His eyes met hers, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch a recognition, as though he'd heard what she hadn't said, the truth beneath the words. "Lonely's different than alone," he said quietly. "One's a choice. The other's just what people call it when they don't understand why you'd want peace." Amelia felt something crack in her chest, some small piece of the wall she'd built. This stranger, this mountain man with his gentle eyes and understanding words, had seen something in her that no one in Red Cloud had bothered to look for in 3 years. "I have a list of supplies," he said, and the moment passed, but it didn't disappear entirely. It hung in the air between them as he rattled off his needs: flour, salt, coffee, ammunition, various staples and tools. She gathered them efficiently, and they negotiated a fair trade for the balance after his payment was applied. As she wrapped his purchases, she found herself saying, "If you plan to stay the winter up there, you'll need more than this come October. The snows hit hard and fast in the bluffs." "I'll be back before the first freeze then," he said, hefting his bundles with easy strength. "Thank you for the fair dealing, Mrs. Carter," she blinked. "How did you know my name?" A hint of a smile touched his bearded face. "Sign outside says Carter's General Store, and you're wearing a ring on a chain under your collar. Saw the glint of it. Seemed respectful to assume." Her hand went automatically to her throat where Thomas's wedding band rested against her skin, hidden beneath her high-necked dress. She'd thought no one noticed it, this secret talisman of her grief. "I'm widowed," she said, then wondered why she'd clarified that. 3 years now." Dalton Keller nodded slowly, his expression unchanging, but his eyes, those eyes saw too much. "Grief doesn't work on other people's timelines," he said. "Anyone who tells you different hasn't really lost something." And then he was gone, the bell chiming his departure, leaving Amelia standing in her empty store with her hand pressed to her throat, and tears burning behind her eyes for the first time in longer than she could remember. The days that followed were ordinary, the normal rhythm of small-town commerce. But Amelia found her thoughts drifting north to the bluffs, wondering about the man who'd built a life up there in the wilderness. She told herself it was simple curiosity, nothing more, but she couldn't deny the way her pulse had quickened when he'd looked at her, really looked at her, and seen a person rather than a tragedy. 2 weeks later, he returned. This time he brought more furs and a haunch of venison that made her gasp at the size easily from a massive elk. "Thought you might appreciate first pick before I take the rest to the restaurant," he said, setting it on her counter with careful consideration for the weight. "This is far too much for just me," she protested, but he shook his head. "You said they broker through you. I'm just cutting out the middle step and giving you the choice cut for your own use. Seems fair, given you pay honest prices." They fell into an easy negotiation, and this time when he gathered his supplies, he lingered, asking her opinion on different grades of rope, on the merits of various coffee brands she stocked, on whether she thought the almanac's prediction for an early winter was likely accurate. "Old Josiah down at the telegraph office swears by the woolly caterpillars," Amelia found herself saying, and was startled by the sound of her own voice carrying a note of lightness. "Says they're thicker than usual, which means a hard freeze coming." "Mountain signs say the same," Dalton agreed. "The squirrels are hoarding like mad, and the elk have already started moving to lower elevations." "Then you should stock up heavier than you planned," she said. "I'd hate to think of you snowed in without adequate supplies." His eyes crinkled at the corners, a smile hiding in his beard. "Worried about me, Mrs. Carter?" She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I worry about all my customers, Mr. Keller. Bad for business if you starve to death and can't trade come spring." "Fair enough." He paid for his goods, but before he left, he turned back. "I've got more timber to fell before the weather turns. If you need anything done around the store, repairs, heavy lifting, anything requiring muscle, I'd be happy to trade work for credit." Amelia thought of the sagging porch steps she'd been meaning to fix, the stockroom shelves that needed reinforcing, all the tasks that required strength she didn't have and money she was reluctant to spend on hired help. "The back porch has some rotted boards," she heard herself say. "And the stockroom needs work. I'll come by Monday morning if that suits you." It suited her fine, though she didn't examine too closely why her heart was racing. Monday morning arrived with the golden light of late August, and true to his word, Dalton Keller appeared at her door with a toolkit slung over his massive shoulder. He tied his hair back, revealing more of his face, the strong planes and angles that spoke of determination and character. When he smiled at her, something in her chest tightened almost painfully. "Show me what needs doing," he said simply. She led him to the back porch first, acutely aware of his presence behind her, the way he seemed to fill the space without overwhelming it. He examined the rotted boards with a practiced eye, testing them with his weight and probing the joists beneath. "Whole section needs replacing," he said. "The supports are compromised too. I'll need to shore it up properly, which means this will take most of the day. That all right with you?" "Of course. I'll pay fairly for your time." He shook his head. "We'll work it out in trade. I need a standing order with you for supplies better than trying to haul everything in one trip before winter. You give me a regular account and I'll make sure your store doesn't fall down around you. Deal?" She should have haggled, should have insisted on more formal terms, but the way he was looking at her with respect and something else, something warm, made her simply nod. "Deal." She left him to his work and returned to the store, but found herself inventing excuses to check on his progress. Each time she looked out, he was deep in concentration, his shirt damp with sweat despite the morning coolness, his powerful arms and shoulders flexing as he pried up old boards and fitted new ones with expert precision. There was something mesmerizing about watching him work, about seeing the care he took with each task, the way he built things to last. At noon, she brought him water and cold meat pie left from her own lunch. He accepted it with surprised gratitude, settling on the back step to eat while she stood nearby, unsure why she didn't just go back inside. "You built your cabin yourself?" she asked, He nodded, swallowing his bite. Every log, every nail. Took the better part of 3 months, but it's solid. Could withstand anything the mountains throw at it. Why there? Why so far from people? For a long moment he didn't answer, just stared out at the alley behind her store, at the backs of buildings and the stretch of prairie beyond. I was a soldier, he finally said. During the war. After it ended, I tried going back to regular life, working in the cities, being around crowds and noise and all those people. But something in me couldn't settle. Kept feeling trapped, kept hearing things that weren't there. Met an old trapper who said the mountains could give a man peace if he was willing to work for it. So I came west, learned the trade, and found he was right. Amelia understood more than he'd said. She heard the echo of trauma in his words, the kind that carved itself into a person's bones and changed how they moved through the world. People think isolation is giving up, she said softly. That if you're not forcing yourself to be happy and social, you're somehow failing. Yeah. His eyes met hers. They do. But sometimes surviving is enough. Sometimes just getting through each day without falling apart is the bravest thing you can do. His expression shifted, gentled impossibly further. You understand that. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. My husband died trying to protect me from a robbery. I lost our child in the aftermath. Everyone expected me to heal on their schedule, to stop grieving when they decided I'd mourned long enough. When I couldn't, when I just wanted to be left alone to run my store and not pretend everything was fine, they decided I was broken beyond repair. And are you? He asked quietly. She'd expected the question to hurt, to trigger the defensive anger that usually rose when people probed her wounds. But from Dalton, it felt different, genuine curiosity rather than judgment, as though he truly wanted to know her answer. I don't know, she admitted. I know I'm different than I was. I know something in me died that day along with Thomas and our baby, but I don't think that makes me broken. Just changed. Just trying to build a new life with the pieces that are left. Dalton set down his empty plate and stood, and she was again struck by his size but not frightened by it. There was a steadiness to him, a groundedness that made her feel safe rather than threatened. I think, he said carefully, that broken things don't run successful businesses and treat people fairly and keep going every single day despite the pain. I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Amelia Carter. The use of her first name, the raw honesty in his voice, the way he looked at her like she was something precious rather than damaged, it all combined to crack something open inside her. Something she'd kept locked tight for 3 years. Her throat worked, and she had to look away before the tears could fall. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't push, didn't try to force more conversation or comfort from her. He just returned to his work, and she went back inside, but something had shifted between them. Some foundation had been laid that felt more solid than any porch board. He finished the porch by late afternoon, then moved to the stock room where the shelves were indeed sagging dangerously under the weight of her inventory. She worked nearby, ostensibly organizing stock but really just aware of him, of his presence in her space, of the way he hummed tunelessly while he worked, and the care he took with every measurement and nail. These shelves were never built right in the first place, he said, shaking his head at the shoddy construction. Whoever did this originally didn't account for the weight you'd be storing. I'll need to rebuild them properly, which means I'll have to come back another day. That's fine, she said, and meant it more than was probably wise. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Dalton gathered his tools and prepared to leave. At the door he hesitated, his hand on the frame. I enjoyed today, he said. The work, but also the conversation. I don't get much of that up in the Bluffs. I enjoyed it too, Amelia admitted. More than I expected to. Could I come back Thursday, finish the shelves and maybe check the roof? Looks like some of the shingles are loose. She should have felt crowded, should have wanted her space back, but instead she felt a flicker of something that might have been anticipation. Thursday would be fine. He nodded, satisfied, and left her standing in her doorway watching his broad back disappear down the street, wondering what exactly was happening and whether she had the courage to let it continue. Thursday came, and with it more repairs, more conversation, more moments of understanding that passed between them like secrets. Dalton worked on her roof in the morning heat, his shirt discarded to reveal the powerful muscles of his back and shoulders, the evidence of scars that spoke of a hard life lived. Amelia tried not to stare, but found her eyes drawn to him again and again, to the masculine strength of him, the capability in every movement. When he climbed down for water, she had lemonade waiting, tart and cold from her ice box. He drank it gratefully, and she watched his throat work with the swallow, felt something flutter low in her stomach that she hadn't experienced in years. "You're staring," he said, but there was no accusation in it, just a quiet observation. "I'm sorry," she said, flustered. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You're not." He set down the glass and looked at her with that steady gaze that saw too much. "I don't mind you looking, Amelia. I just want to make sure I'm not pushing where I'm not wanted." "You're not pushing," she said softly. "You're just being kind, and I'm not used to that anymore. People in this town are fools if they can't see what you're worth." The words, so simple and direct, landed in her heart like a stone in still water, sending ripples through everything she'd believed about herself for 3 years. "You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you're honest in your business. I know you're kind even when people probably don't deserve it. I know you've survived something terrible and kept going. I know you understand what it's like to need distance from the world. That's enough for me to know you're worth a hell of a lot more than this town gives you credit for." She wanted to argue, to deflect, to protect herself from the dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. But she'd been cold for so long, and Dalton Keller was like standing next to a fire, irresistible heat after years of winter. "Why are you doing this?" she asked instead. "The repairs, the attention, all of it. What do you want from me?" He didn't answer immediately, just studied her face like he was reading something written there. "Honestly, I'm not sure yet. I came to town for supplies and found someone who understands what it's like to be told you're too damaged to deserve good things. I like talking to you. I like being near you. I like the way you don't treat me like I'm simple just because I live in the mountains. If that's friendship, then I want your friendship, if it could be more." He trailed off, leaving the possibility hanging in the air between them. Amelia's heart was racing, her palms damp with something that might have been fear or might have been hope. "I don't know if I can be more. I don't know if there's enough of me left after everything that happened." "Then we'll figure it out as we go," Dalton said simply. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who understand each other spending time together. That sound all right to you? It sounded terrifying and wonderful in equal measure, but she found herself nodding. "Yes, that sounds all right." His smile was like sunrise, slow and warm and full of light. "Good. Now I better get back to that roof before the day gets any hotter." She watched him climb back up, his movements sure and confident, and allowed herself to feel something she'd thought was dead possibility. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Dalton would come to town every few days, bringing meat and furs to trade, taking supplies back to his cabin, and finding reasons to linger at her store. He fixed her squeaky door hinges, reinforced her front counter, repaired her storm shutters, and rebuilt the fence behind her building. In return, she fed him lunch, kept him in coffee and conversation, and found herself laughing for the first time in years at his dry observations about town life versus mountain solitude. Mrs. Henderson told me today that I'm taking advantage of your good nature, Amelia said one afternoon in early September, watching him repair a crack in her floor. She said a mountain man probably has ulterior motives. Dalton glanced up, his expression amused. You think I have ulterior motives? I think if you do, they're probably kinder than most people's good intentions. He set down his tools and stood, brushing sawdust from his pants. My motive is that I enjoy your company and I like making sure you're safe and comfortable. If that's ulterior, then I'm guilty. But I won't apologize for it. I don't want you to apologize. She moved closer, close enough to smell the pine and wood smoke that clung to his skin, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. I just wanted you to know that people are talking. Let them talk. I learned a long time ago that people will always find something to gossip about, and their opinions don't pay my bills or warm my bed at night. He paused, then added more softly, unless their talk bothers you. If it does, I can make myself scarce. No. The word came out more forcefully than she'd intended. No, I don't want that. I'm just not used to people caring about what I do anymore. I care. He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to step away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were calloused and warm against her skin, and she found herself leaning into the touch. I care more than I probably should, given we've only known each other a few weeks. I care too, she whispered. It scares me how much. Love's supposed to be scary, he said, then seemed to catch himself. Or so I've heard. I'm not exactly an expert on the subject. The word love hung between them, too big and too soon, and yet somehow exactly right. Amelia felt her breath catch, felt the walls she'd built starting to crumble, and for once she didn't try to shore them up. You said broken things deserve love most of all, she said, though he'd never said those exact words. But somehow she knew he believed them, knew he saw her brokenness and valued her anyway. They do, he agreed. Because broken things understand how precious love is, how hard won and fragile and worth fighting for. Unbroken people take it for granted, think it's easy and endless. But anyone who's been shattered knows better. She reached up and placed her hand over his where it still rested against her cheek. I don't know how to do this anymore. I don't know how to trust myself to feel things without falling apart. Then we'll take it slow, he promised. We'll take it one day at a time, and if it gets to be too much, we'll stop. No shame in that. But Amelia, I think you're capable of a lot more than you give yourself credit for. I think you've been surviving when you're ready to start living again. Tears spilled over, the first real tears she'd shed since the funeral 3 years ago. They weren't tears of grief exactly, but something more complicated: grief and hope and fear and longing all tangled together in a knot she couldn't unpick. Dalton pulled her gently into his arms, and she went, pressing her face against his chest and letting herself cry for the first time in forever, letting herself be held by this mountain man who somehow saw past her brokenness to the woman underneath. He didn't try to shush her or tell her it would be all right. He just held her, one massive hand stroking her back in slow, soothing circles, letting her purge 3 years of pent-up emotion against his shirt. When the storm finally passed, she felt wrung out and shaky, but somehow lighter, as though crying had released pressure she hadn't known she'd been carrying. I'm sorry, she murmured against his chest. I didn't mean to fall apart on you. Don't apologize for feeling things, he said firmly. That's the opposite of being broken, Amelia. That's proof you're still here, still fighting. She pulled back enough to look up at him, at this strong, gentle man who'd appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known how to speak. Will you stay for dinner? I make a decent stew, and it seems wrong to send you back to the mountains on an empty stomach." His smile was answer enough, but he said, "I'd like that very much." They ate upstairs in her small apartment above the store, and Amelia realized it was the first time she'd invited anyone into her private space since becoming a widow. It should have felt strange or invasive, but instead it felt right, watching Dalton fold his large frame into her small kitchen chair, praising her cooking with genuine enthusiasm, telling her stories about mountain life that made her laugh and sometimes gasp at the danger he faced so casually. "Don't you get lonely up there?" she asked as they lingered over coffee, the sun setting beyond her window. "Truly, no neighbors, no one to talk to for days at a time, sometimes," he admitted, "especially in deep winter when the snow's too high to travel easily. But I learned a long time ago that loneliness and solitude are different things. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is choosing peace over chaos. I chose solitude, and most days I'm content with it." "Most days," she pressed. His eyes met hers across the table, steady and sure. "Most days. But lately I've been thinking that maybe I've had enough solitude, maybe I'm ready for something more." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Because of me?" "Yeah, Amelia, because of you." The honest simplicity of it, the way he laid his feelings bare without games or manipulation, was more seductive than any flowery speech. She stood, her legs unsteady, and moved around the table to stand before him. He looked up at her, waiting, always giving her the choice. "I'm not ready for anything too fast," she said, "but I think I'm ready to try, to see if there's something here worth exploring." He stood too, towering over her but somehow making her feel safe rather than small. "We'll go at whatever pace you need. I'm not going anywhere," she believed him. Against all her carefully cultivated cynicism, against all the lessons grief had taught her about the fragility of happiness, she believed this mountain man with his gentle eyes and strong hands when he said he would stay. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the kisses she remembered. Thomas had been sweet and tender, a boy she'd grown up with who'd become her husband more through inevitability than passion. Dalton kissed her like she was precious and powerful in equal measure, his lips firm against hers, his beard soft where it brushed her skin, his hands cradling her face with devastating gentleness. She felt something ignite in her chest, something she'd thought had died with Thomas, and she kissed him back with 3 years of suppressed longing, with all the emotion she'd kept locked away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers and said, "I should probably go before I forget how to be a gentleman." "What if I don't want you to be a gentleman?" The words surprised her, but she didn't take them back. His eyes darkened, his hands tightening slightly on her waist. "Amelia, you're feeling vulnerable right now. I won't take advantage of that." "You're not taking advantage. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you." She kissed him again, pouring certainty into it, and felt his restraint waver. "Are you sure?" he asked against her mouth. "Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to just friendship." "I'm sure. I want this. I want you." He swept her up then, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing, and carried her to the bedroom beyond. He laid her on the bed with infinite care, and then proceeded to worship her with his hands and mouth, until she forgot every reason she'd thought herself too broken for this, until she remembered what it felt like to be desired and treasured and whole. Afterward, lying wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady thunder of his heartbeat, Amelia felt something settle in her soul. This was what healing felt like, not the absence of scars, but the presence of someone who loved you because of them, not in spite of them. "Stay tonight," she whispered. "Don't go back to the mountains yet." His arms tightened around her. "I'll stay as long as you want me." She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, and for the first time in 3 years she didn't dream of death and blood and loss. She dreamed of pine forests and mountain streams, and a strong man with gentle hands building a life big enough for two. Morning came softly, golden light spilling through her curtains, and Amelia woke to find Dalton already awake, propped on one elbow watching her with an expression so tender it made her throat tight. "Morning," he rumbled, his voice even deeper with sleep. "I was trying to figure out if last night was real or the best dream I've ever had." She smiled, feeling shy and bold in equal measure. "It was real, unless we're both having the same dream." He leaned down and kissed her, slow and sweet. "Then I hope I never wake up." They stayed in bed longer than was proper, talking and touching and learning each other's bodies in the gentle morning light. Eventually, hunger drove them to the kitchen, where Amelia made breakfast while Dalton watched her with an intensity that made her blush. "You keep looking at me like that and this bacon is going to burn," she said, trying for stern but landing somewhere near delighted. "Can't help it. You're beautiful when you're cooking. You're beautiful all the time, but especially now, in your dressing gown with your hair down. Making breakfast like this is something we do every morning. Would you want that?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "To do this every morning?" He stood and came to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. "I'd want that more than anything. But I know it's fast and I know you need time. I can be patient, Amelia. I've waited my whole life for someone like you. I can wait however long you need." She turned in his arms, the bacon forgotten. "What if I don't want to wait? What if I'm tired of being careful and scared? What if I want to take a risk on happiness? Then I'm right here, ready to catch you if you fall." The bacon did burn, but neither of them cared. They ate it anyway, laughing at the charred edges, and Amelia felt 17 again, giddy with new love and infinite possibility. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and she refused to let fear steal this from her. Over the following weeks, Red Cloud's gossip mill went into overdrive. The widow Carter was carrying on with that mountain man, they whispered. It was unseemly, too fast, improper. She was making a fool of herself. He was taking advantage. It wouldn't last. Amelia heard every word and ignored them all. She'd spent 3 years living according to other people's expectations of grief, molding herself to fit their comfortable narrative of the tragic widow. She was done with that. If they wanted to judge her for finding love again, for choosing joy over endless mourning, then let them judge. She had more important things to focus on, like learning every detail of Dalton Keller's life, his hopes and dreams and fears. Like spending her evenings in his arms, talking until dawn about everything and nothing. Like watching him work with his hands, building and fixing and creating, and feeling her heart swell with pride that this strong, capable man had chosen her. He brought her up to his cabin in late September, when the aspen trees were turning gold and the air held the crisp promise of coming winter. The ride took most of a day, climbing up into the bluffs on a narrow trail that wound through pine forests and past rushing streams. When they finally arrived, Amelia understood why he loved this place. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, solid and well built with a stone chimney and real glass windows that must have cost dearly to haul up the mountain. Inside was one large room with a sleeping loft, meticulously organized and scrupulously clean, everything in its place and built to last. It was a home, not just a shelter, the work of a man who cared about his environment even when no one else would see it. "It's wonderful," she breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "I can see why you love it here." He looked pleased, vulnerable in a way he rarely showed. "I was hoping you'd like it. I know it's rustic compared to town, but it suits me. It suits you perfectly." She went to the window and looked out at the view, mountains rolling away in shades of green and gold, a vista so vast and beautiful it made her chest ache. "It's peaceful. I can see why you found healing here." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. "I did find healing here, but I think I was still only half healed until I met you. You're the rest of what I was missing, Amelia." She covered his hands with hers, lacing their fingers together. "I feel the same. I thought I'd grieved and moved on, but really I'd just gone numb. You reminded me how to feel again." They spent 2 days at the cabin, just the two of them and the mountains and the endless quiet. Dalton showed her his trapping routes, taught her to read the signs of game in the forest, let her help with the endless work of preparing for winter. In the evenings they cooked together over his fireplace, and at night they made love in his bed built from lodgepole pine. And Amelia felt herself transforming from the hollow woman she'd been into someone new, someone who carried her grief but wasn't defined by it. On their last evening before returning to Red Cloud, they sat outside watching the sun set over the mountains, wrapped together in a heavy blanket against the cooling air. "I don't want to go back," she admitted. "I love it here. I love being away from all those pitying looks and whispered judgments." "Then don't go back," he said simply. She twisted to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean marry me. Sell the store or close it or hire someone to run it. Come live up here with me. We'll build a life together away from everyone who thinks they know what's best for you." Her heart was racing, her mind spinning. "That's crazy. We've only known each other 2 months. Is it crazy? Or is it two people who have both survived hard things recognizing something real when they find it?" He turned her in his arms so he could see her face. "I love you, Amelia Carter. I loved you from the first moment you looked at me like I was a person instead of a curiosity. I love your strength and your kindness and your determination to keep going even when it hurts. I love how you understand me without needing explanations. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, building you a home, giving you all the love you were told you don't deserve. Marry me." Tears were streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, joyful tears, the kind she'd thought she'd never cry again. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." His kiss was fierce and possessive and tender all at once, and when he finally pulled back, his own eyes were suspiciously bright. "We'll do it right. We'll go back to Red Cloud, settle your affairs, and have a proper wedding. Then I'm bringing you back here and spending the winter showing you exactly how much I love you. What if I can't sell the store in time? What if winter comes before we can make arrangements? Then we'll figure it out. We'll go back and forth, or I'll winter in town with you, or we'll hire someone to mind the store while you're up here. The details don't matter, Amelia. What matters is that we're together." She believed him, and more than that, she believed in them, in the possibility of second chances and new beginnings and love that grew stronger for having been earned the hard way. They returned to Red Cloud the next day, and if Amelia had expected opposition or censure, she was pleasantly surprised. Oh, the gossips still clucked and whispered, but others, the ones who'd always treated her with genuine kindness, were happy for her. The restaurant owner who bought Dalton's meat shook his hand and congratulated them both. The banker who'd helped her manage the store's accounts after her father died smiled warmly and asked when the wedding would be. Even Mrs. Henderson, the worst gossip in town, eventually softened. "I suppose if you're going to remarry, a strong man who can provide for you is better than staying alone," she sniffed. "Though I still think it's terribly fast." "Some things are worth moving fast for," Amelia replied, and refused to feel guilty about it. Selling the store proved easier than expected. A young couple recently arrived from Illinois were looking for an established business, and they had the capital to make a fair offer. The negotiations took 3 weeks, during which Dalton stayed in town, sleeping in the boarding house but spending every free moment with Amelia, helping her sort through inventory and personal belongings, making lists of what to sell and what to take to the cabin. They married on a cool October morning, with the preacher presiding and a handful of friends in attendance. Amelia wore a simple dress of deep blue, and Dalton wore new clothes purchased for the occasion, his hair trimmed but still long enough to curl at his collar, his beard neatly groomed. When he took her hand and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure, and when she responded, promising to love and cherish him for whatever time they had, she meant every word with a fervor that surprised her. There was no big celebration, no elaborate reception. They had dinner with the few friends who'd attended, accepted congratulations and well wishes, and then Dalton took her back to her apartment, their apartment, for one last night, and made love to her with a desperate tenderness that spoke to how much this meant to him. "My wife," he murmured against her skin, "you're my wife now, and you're my husband." The word felt strange on her tongue after 3 years of widow, but good strange, right strange. "I love you, Dalton Keller. I love you too, Amelia Keller, and I'm going to spend every day proving it." They left Red Cloud a week later, the store sold and their belongings packed on 2 horses and a mule. The town turned out to see them off, and Amelia felt a pang for what she was leaving behind: the familiar streets, her father's legacy, the life she'd built from the ashes of tragedy. But when she looked at Dalton, at his strong profile and confident seat on his horse, at the future stretching out before them, the pang faded into something more like relief. She was leaving the past behind, and she was ready. The ride up to the cabin took on a different quality this time. It wasn't a visit but a homecoming, and when the cabin came into view through the golden trees, Amelia felt her heart lift. This was home now, not the building itself, but the life it represented, the choice she'd made to embrace love instead of fear. Dalton had been busy during their week in town. The cabin's interior had been rearranged to accommodate her things. New shelves built for her books and belongings. A proper kitchen area set up with the supplies they'd hauled from town. He'd even built a small addition, a room that could serve as a workspace or eventual nursery, the walls fresh planed and smelling of pine. "When did you do all this?" she asked, amazed at the work he'd accomplished. "I hired some help, came up a few days ahead to get it ready. I wanted you to feel like this was your home, not just my cabin you were moving into." The thoughtfulness of it, the care he'd taken to make her comfortable, brought tears to her eyes yet again. "You keep making me cry," she said, half laughing. "Happy tears are allowed," he said, pulling her close. "As many as you want." They settled into married life with surprising ease. The rhythms of mountain living suited Amelia better than she'd expected. She learned to help with the trapping and hunting, to cure hides and dress game, to read the weather signs and prepare for the changing seasons. Dalton was an endlessly patient teacher, showing her the skills he'd learned over years of solitary living, praising her successes, and gently correcting her mistakes. In turn, she brought civilization to his wilderness, cooking elaborate meals from her recipes, organizing his chaotic collection of supplies, reading to him in the evenings from the books she'd brought from town. She tended a small garden in a sunny spot near the cabin, coaxing vegetables from the mountain soil, and preserved everything for the winter ahead. The first snow came in late November, a light dusting that made the world look enchanted. They stood outside together watching it fall, and Amelia tilted her face up to catch flakes on her tongue like a child. "We're officially snowed in for the winter," Dalton said, but he didn't sound concerned. "Hope you don't get tired of my company." "Never," she promised, and kissed him there in the falling snow, tasting winter and happiness on his lips. The winter months passed in a blur of contentment. Snowed in together, they had nothing but time to talk and laugh and make love, time to learn each other's rhythms and quirks, time to build the foundation of a marriage that would last. Dalton taught her to snowshoe, and they made expeditions through the winter forest, tracking animals and marveling at the stark beauty of the mountains in their white coat. At night, curled together in bed with the fire crackling and the wind howling outside, Amelia felt safe in a way she'd never expected to feel again. This man, this strong, gentle giant of a man, had taken her broken pieces and helped her forge them into something new, something better for having been shattered and remade. "Are you happy?" he asked her one night as they lay together watching shadows dance on the ceiling. "Happier than I ever thought I'd be again," she said honestly. "You saved me, Dalton." "No." He tightened his arms around her. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to do it." Spring came gradually, the snow retreating up the mountainside as the world came back to life. With the thaw came visitors, trappers stopping by to trade goods and gossip, mountain families who'd spent the winter in their own isolated cabins, curious to meet Dalton's new wife. Amelia found she liked these hardy mountain people, their straightforward ways and lack of pretense. They didn't judge her for remarrying quickly or question whether she'd grieved appropriately. They simply accepted that she was Dalton's wife now, and that was enough. In late April, as the last of the snow melted and wildflowers began to carpet the meadows, Amelia realized her monthly bleeding was late. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, afraid to tempt fate. But as the days stretched into weeks and other signs appeared, tender breasts, morning queasiness, a strange exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure, she had to acknowledge the truth. She was pregnant. The realization brought a complicated tangle of emotions. Joy, certainly, at the thought of carrying Dalton's child, but also grief, sharp and unexpected, for the baby she'd lost 3 years ago, the child who'd never had a chance to live. And fear, bone deep and paralyzing, that something would go wrong again, that she'd lose this pregnancy too, and the heartbreak would shatter what she'd rebuilt. Dalton found her crying one morning in the garden, her hands pressed to her still flat belly, tears streaming down her face. "Amelia, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" He was beside her instantly, his hands running over her looking for injury, his face tight with concern. "I'm pregnant," she said, and watched understanding dawn in his eyes. "That's wonderful, isn't it? Why are you crying?" Then, more hesitantly, "Unless you don't want it." "No, I want it. I want your baby more than anything." She grabbed his hands, holding them tight. "But I'm terrified, Dalton. What if I lose this one too? What if my body can't carry a child to term?" What if he silenced her with a kiss, gentle and grounding? What if the sky falls? What if the mountains crumble? We can't live in the what-ifs, Amelia. All we can do is take care of you and this baby the best we know how and trust that the rest will work out. But what if it doesn't? Then we'll grieve together and keep going, same as we've done with everything else. He cupped her face in his large hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "But I believe in you. I believe in your strength, and I believe this baby is going to be just fine." His faith became her anchor over the months that followed. As her belly grew and the baby quickened, as summer gave way to fall and they prepared for another winter, Dalton was endlessly patient with her fears and worries. He built a beautiful cradle from maple wood, carved with mountain scenes. He hunted extra game to cure for the winter, making sure they'd have plenty of food for her and the nursing baby. He held her when she woke from nightmares of blood and loss, and reminded her that this pregnancy was different, that she was healthy and strong and everything was progressing normally. The mountain families were invaluable, the women sharing their knowledge of childbirth and infant care, bringing her herbal remedies for morning sickness and back pain, promising to come when her time arrived to help with the delivery. In late January, as snow fell thick and heavy outside, Amelia's labor began. It was long and difficult, hours of pain that seemed to go on forever, but Dalton never left her side, his strong hands supporting her, his voice steady and encouraging even when she was sure she couldn't continue. "You can do this," he told her as another contraction gripped her. "You're the strongest person I know, Amelia, just a little longer." And then suddenly it was over, and a baby's cry filled the cabin, sharp and indignant and perfect. The midwife, old Mrs. Thompson from a neighboring claim, placed a squirming bundle in Amelia's arms and said, "A boy. A strong, healthy boy." Amelia looked down at her son, at his red face and dark hair and tiny fists waving in protest, and felt something slot into place in her soul. This was what she'd been missing, what she'd mourned without knowing, not just a baby, but this specific child, this little person who was part her and part Dalton and wholly himself. "Hello," she whispered, tracing his tiny features with a shaking finger. "Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you." Dalton was beside her, his face slack with wonder, tears streaming unashamedly into his beard. "He's perfect," he said hoarsely. "You're perfect, both of you." They named him Daniel Carter Keller, honoring Amelia's father and giving him both of their names. He was a good baby, healthy and strong despite being born in the dead of mountain winter, and he thrived under their careful attention. Watching Dalton with their son filled Amelia with an emotion so profound, she had no words for it. This massive, powerful man cradled their tiny baby with infinite gentleness, singing him songs in his rumbling voice, walking him through the cabin during fussy nights, his face soft with love. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed one night as he rocked Daniel to sleep. "A family. A real home. Someone to love and be loved by. I thought I was too damaged, too far removed from normal life to ever have something this good." "You're not damaged," Amelia said firmly. "You're careful and thoughtful and exactly what I needed, what we both needed." He looked at her over their son's small head and his smile was radiant. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two broken people who put each other back together." "No," she corrected gently. "Two whole people who had to break before they could find each other. There's a difference." Spring came again, and summer, and the years began to flow one into another with the comfortable rhythm of a life well lived. Daniel grew from infant to toddler to a sturdy little boy who loved the mountains as much as his father did. 2 years after his birth, Amelia delivered a daughter they named Sarah, who had her mother's quick mind and her father's steady temperament. 3 years after that came another boy, Thomas, named for Amelia's first husband in acknowledgement that the past was part of what shaped the present, but didn't have to define it. The cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family, new rooms added as needed, built with the same care Dalton brought to everything he touched. Amelia taught the children to read and write, using the books she'd brought from Red Cloud and others they ordered from catalogs. Dalton taught them woodcraft and hunting, how to read the mountains and respect the wilderness. They made occasional trips down to Red Cloud, trading furs and meat for supplies and news of the wider world. Each time they visited, Amelia felt less and less connection to the place, until it became simply another town rather than the site of her tragedy. Time and distance and love had healed those wounds, leaving scars but not open sores. On one such trip, when Daniel was 10 and Sarah was 8 and Thomas barely 5, they stopped by what had been her father's store. The young couple who'd bought it had prospered, expanding the inventory and even adding a second location. They greeted Amelia warmly, introducing their own children, and she felt only pride that the family business continued to thrive. "You miss it?" Dalton asked as they rode back up into the mountains, the children chattering excitedly about the candy they'd been allowed to buy. "Town life, running the store, all of it." Amelia looked around at the mountains rising around them, at their children healthy and happy on their horses, at her husband strong and solid beside her, and shook her head. "Not even a little bit. This is where I belong. With you, with them, in these mountains. Everything that happened before was just preparing me for this." That night, lying in bed with Dalton's arms around her and the sounds of their children sleeping softly in the next room, Amelia thought about the woman she'd been broken. They'd said, too damaged to love again, too hurt to ever be whole. They'd been wrong, every single one of them. She wasn't broken. She'd been transformed. Grief had carved her into someone stronger, someone capable of recognizing real love when it found her, someone brave enough to choose happiness over safety. And Dalton, her mountain man with his gentle hands and seeing eyes, he'd understood what everyone else had missed. Broken things didn't need fixing. They needed love, patience, and someone willing to see their beauty in the cracks. "What are you thinking?" Dalton murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "That I love you. That I'm grateful every day that you walked into my store with your furs and your kindness, and your complete lack of judgment about who I was supposed to be." His arms tightened around her. "I'm the grateful one. You gave me a reason to come down from the mountain, to build a life instead of just surviving. You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing." They fell asleep like that, wrapped together after more than a decade of marriage, still as in love as the day they'd wed, still finding new ways to cherish each other. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate. The mountains stood eternal around them, sheltering this family that had been built from broken pieces into something beautiful and lasting. Years continued to pass in their mountain sanctuary. The children grew strong and capable under their parents' guidance. Daniel developed his father's skill with woodworking and his mother's head for business, eventually taking over most of the trading trips to town. Sarah proved to have a gift for healing, learning from the mountain family's herbal knowledge and helping tend to injuries and illnesses throughout their scattered community. Thomas, the baby, grew into a young man with a talent for tracking and an uncanny ability to read the weather, invaluable skills in the unpredictable mountains. Amelia watched her children become adults with pride and a bittersweet awareness of time's passage. She was 45 now, her hair streaked with silver, her body bearing the marks of 3 pregnancies and 20 years of mountain living. But she'd never felt more beautiful, because Dalton still looked at her with the same wonder he'd shown that first day in her store, still reached for her hand when they walked, still whispered his love against her skin in the quiet hours of night. "We're getting old," she said one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the peaks. It was just the two of them now. Daniel was married and building his own cabin nearby. Sarah was apprenticing with a doctor in Red Cloud, and Thomas was out on an extended hunting trip. "Speak for yourself," Dalton rumbled, pulling her closer against his side. "I feel 18 again every time I look at you," she laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. "You're ridiculous. We're middle-aged and gray and our joints creak in the morning. And I love every one of your gray hairs, every creak and groan, every year we've had together." He turned her face toward him, his brown eyes still as clear and seeing as they'd been 2 decades ago. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Amelia Keller, then, now, and forever." "I love you," she said, simple and profound. I love the life we built together. I love that you saw past what everyone else thought I was to who I really could be. I didn't see past anything. I just saw you, all of you, including the broken parts, and I loved all of it." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, scattered across the darkening sky like diamonds. This life they'd created wasn't perfect. There had been hard times, lean winters, illness and injury, and the normal struggles of raising children in the wilderness. But it was real and honest and built on a foundation of mutual respect and abiding love, and that made it more precious than any fairy tale ending. "You ever think about that first day?" Amelia asked. "When you walked into my store?" "Every day," Dalton admitted. "I think about how close I came to just trading and leaving without really talking to you. I almost did, you know. Almost kept my distance, figured you were too beautiful, too refined for a rough mountain man. But something in your eyes stopped me. You looked as lonely as I felt, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we could be lonely together." "We were never lonely after that," she said. "Not for a single day." "No," he agreed. "We were never lonely again." More years flowed by, marked by the cycles of seasons and the milestones of family life. Daniel and his wife gave them 3 grandchildren, robust boys who loved visiting their grandparents' cabin and learning mountain ways from Dalton. Sarah eventually returned from Red Cloud with a husband, a quiet man who'd won her heart with his patience and kindness, and they settled close enough for frequent visits. Thomas married a girl from one of the other mountain families, and together they carved out their own homestead deeper in the wilderness. Amelia and Dalton aged together, their bodies slowing but their love only deepening with time. They became the matriarch and patriarch of a growing mountain clan, the wise elders that others came to for advice and help. Their cabin was always open, always welcoming, a place of refuge and love in the harsh beauty of the peaks. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate. It was a rare thing to have everyone together, and Amelia felt her heart might burst with happiness as she looked around at the crowd spilling from the cabin into the clearing. 3 generations of love and life. Daniel stood and raised his cup in a toast. "To my parents, who taught us that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing each other every day through every challenge. You showed us what a real partnership looks like, what it means to build a life together. We're all better for your example." Everyone drank and cheered, and Amelia wiped away happy tears while Dalton squeezed her hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. Later, after the celebration had wound down and they were alone again in their cabin, Dalton took her in his arms and danced her slowly around the room to music only they could hear. 30 years, he said. Best 30 years of my life. Mine too. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, that sound that had become home to her. Thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing something worth loving even when I couldn't see it myself. Thank you for being brave enough to try again, to risk your heart one more time. I know it cost you. She pulled back to look at him, this man who'd become her entire world, who'd shown her that broken things didn't need to stay broken, that love could heal even the deepest wounds if you were brave enough to accept it. It didn't cost me anything. It gave me everything. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion that had never faded between them. And afterward, Amelia felt complete in a way she'd never expected to feel again after Thomas's death. This was what healing looked like, not forgetting the past, but building a future so rich and full that the past became just one part of a much larger story. The years continued their steady march. Amelia's hair turned fully silver, and Dalton's beard followed suit, making him look like some ancient mountain sage from a storybook. Their bodies aged and slowed, but their spirits remained young, still finding joy in simple things: morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, walks through the forest they'd called home for decades, the laughter of grandchildren and great-grandchildren who filled their cabin with noise and love. When Amelia was 68, she woke one morning to find Dalton still asleep beside her, his breathing shallow and labored. Panic seized her until she saw his eyes open, saw recognition and love in them even as his body failed. "Don't you dare," she said fiercely, taking his hand. "Don't you dare leave me, Dalton Keller. We have more years together. We have more life to live." He smiled, that gentle smile she'd loved for 45 years. "I'm not going anywhere yet, love. Just tired this morning, old bones acting up." But they both knew it was more than that. His heart, strong as it had been for decades, was finally wearing out. The doctor Sarah brought from Red Cloud confirmed it. Dalton's time was limited, months at most, perhaps only weeks. Amelia refused to waste a moment in grief. Instead, she gathered their family around them, filling the cabin and the clearing with love and laughter and stories, making sure Dalton was surrounded by the legacy he'd built, the family he'd created, the love he'd given so freely. On a warm summer evening, with the aspens shimmering gold in the setting sun and 3 generations of Kellers gathered close, Dalton took his last breath with Amelia's hand in his, her tears falling on their joined fingers as she whispered her love one final time. The grief was crushing, monumental, as profound as any she'd experienced. But this time, she wasn't alone. Her children held her, her grandchildren cried with her, and the entire mountain community came together to mourn a man who'd been friend and mentor to so many. They buried him on the ridge overlooking their cabin, in a spot where he'd loved to sit and watch the sunrise. The grave was marked with a stone carved by Daniel with simple words: "Dalton Keller, beloved husband, father, and friend. He loved broken things best of all." Amelia stood by that grave as the sun set on the day of his funeral, her family respectfully giving her space for private grief, and she spoke to him one last time. "Thank you," she said through her tears. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for loving me when I thought I was unlovable, for building this beautiful life with me. You were right, my love. Broken things do deserve love most of all, and you loved me so well that I forgot I was ever broken." She lived for 5 more years after Dalton's death, years filled with family and purpose, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. She helped raise grandchildren, passed down family stories and recipes, and made sure that everyone knew about the mountain man who'd saved a broken widow and shown her that love was always possible, always worth the risk. When Amelia passed peacefully in her sleep at 73, surrounded by her children and with her hand resting on the letters Dalton had written her over the years, they buried her beside him on that ridge. The marker Daniel carved for her read: "Amelia Keller, beloved wife, mother, and friend." She proved that love heals all wounds. The family continued to thrive in the mountains, generation after generation, carrying forward the legacy of 2 people who'd been told they were too broken to love again, and who'd proven that love was exactly what broken things needed most. The cabin stood for decades as a reminder, a testament to what could be built from pain and loss and courage. And the story of Dalton and Amelia became legend in the mountain communities, the tale of the gentle giant and the broken widow who'd found each other and created something beautiful from their shared scars. And high on that ridge, where the aspens turned gold every fall and the wildflowers bloomed every spring, 2 graves stood side by side, forever joined, forever loved, forever proof that broken things deserved love most of all, and that love, real and true and brave, could heal anything.